with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Welcome to this special edition of Talking Pints, where we look back at some of the best interviews in 2021. Now, normally, we provide the drinks for the people that come along to be interviewed and have a conversation in the GB News pub. But on one occasion, Jacob Rees-Mogg decided to bring his own homemade cider.
We've got the cider that I make at home. So these are Rees-Mogg apples that my children throw into this fantastic musher that puts out the juice and obviously then all the remains of the apples. And then it sits in a barn for a year and comes out as cider. And we make about 30 gallons of it a year, which I have to give away because I only drink about a pint of it a week. So I don't
What sort of strength is it, Jacob?
I have no idea. You
Right.
taste, you tell, you're the expert.
Well, cheers. Cheers.
You're,
Well, this is the Rees-Mogg
Uh,
cider. Let's give it a go. Oh, wow, that's real. That's real. Yeah.
I'm not going to drink it all whilst...
No, that's fine. You can afterwards. Jacob, one of the things that those that really know you understand is you first appeared on television aged about 11 with the Financial Times. And I think at the time your father was running something called the Fleet Street Letter. He was, yes. Yeah, he actually offered me a job there once, believe it or not. I don't think I've ever told you that. He did. He did.
But my father was a great admirer of yours.
I know he was. But you've always been interested in investment, in stock markets, and what to do with money. And something new has arrived. We knew about it back in the 70s, into the 80s. It damaged people's savings in a way I don't think anything else can. It's the I word, it's inflation. And we've got the Bank of England and the Fed in America saying, oh, don't worry your little heads. It'll just be a little short-term thing and it won't be a problem. And yet I've always taken the view that inflation is a disease of money. And once you catch that, nearly often caused by governments and by excessive spending and borrowing. And then once you get that disease, it's very difficult to get rid of. So just with your investment manager hat on, how do you see inflation?
Well, I think going to the basics of economics, if you increase the money supply beyond a reasonable level, it has an inflationary effect. And it's very difficult to work out the precise causality. So monetary policy in the 1980s didn't particularly work because it was hard to say a greater than money supply of a particular measure of a certain level is directly inflationary. But that the simple point that if you create an enormous amount of money, it has to go somewhere. Money must find a home is true. And there was a very important House of Lords report. Lord Forsyth, Michael Forsyth, was, I think, the chairman of the committee that put out, warning us that we mustn't get addicted to free money. And I think that's right. And you've begun to see, partly because of trade distortions created by the pandemic, so containers being in the wrong part of the world and therefore transport costs going up, the beginnings of inflation. You've seen a very rapid increase in wages, which is in part extremely good because you want people to be getting better off. You want a real increase in wages, but it mustn't be too fast because that leads to inflationary pressures. So I think you're right to be concerned. I'm pleased that the Bank of England has said that it will look at reducing quantitative easing before raising interest rates. I think that's obviously the Bank of England's independent. It's not for me as a minister to be saying what they ought to be doing, but it seems nonetheless that that is the right way around, that it's withdrawing some of that excess liquidity that was needed to deal with a crisis and gradually normalising. Yeah. So I think the Bank of England...
So you think they're handling it the right way?
Is handling it
Well, let's
sensibly.
hope you're right.
The difficulty with all of this always is the speed of response. And sometimes you find that central banks have to act very suddenly, which risks creating an economic shock.
So investors need to watch inflation?
Very carefully.
Yeah, no, I think this is a view that I've formed very, very much. It's all back to the Brexit referendum. And, you and I are very much on the same side on that. And I think, both emotionally involved in that. We believed in it with all our heart and soul. I was unhappy. We didn't fall out, but I was unhappy that she, in the end, voted for Mrs May's dreadful deal. But I'm not going to have a punch-up over that with you today.
Well, we got there in the end, and we've
discussed
new
that
leader.
before. That's the point. Thank goodness we got rid of Mrs May, and I like to think I played a bit of a hand in that. And we've got Boris and we've got Brexit done. It's not perfect. The fishermen are angry. Really angry. And if you drove from your constituency an hour and a half, 2 hours southwest to Brixham Market, or I recommend you don't at the moment, they really are jolly angry about it, the way it's worked out. But constitutionally, we finished up with Northern Ireland. It's been effectively annexed. What are we going to do, Jacob, to sort that out? Is the will there? I hear Lord Frost, who I think did a jolly good job as negotiator, and I hear him saying tough things. Are we going to sort out Northern Ireland? Because if we don't, I do fear the knock-on for the rest of the Union is quite significant.
Northern Ireland is a fundamental part of our country. Northern Ireland is as much part of our country
it was.
as Somerset. No, it
was.
It still is. And you cannot allow the European Union to extract Northern Ireland from the United Kingdom. And you're right to say that the EU has not implemented what it agreed with the goodwill that we had a reasonable expectation could apply. It has not applied the flexibilities. It has not even recognised animals in the UK as being from the safest countries of all. And as the problem with rabies has always been the continent to us rather than us.
And she threatened us with that. She threatened to put the hard border back, and we know all of that. But does there come a point when we have to say, look, you've been completely unreasonable about this?
The British government is completely committed to ensuring that Northern Ireland remains a fundamental part of our United Kingdom. Lord Frost is, as you said earlier, a tough negotiator. The British government is going to ensure that Northern Ireland is protected.
There is work to be done.
There is work to be done, and it needs to be done at a sensible pace. And we need to try. You and I both want a relationship with the EU which is one of goodwill. And we want to get to that. But we need to understand, and you probably understand it better than I do because of being an MEP and perhaps being more intimately involved, that they feel very hurt still with us and are very angry with us. And there is still, yes?
Oh, yeah.
And it is in our interest in the long term to have a friendly relationship with the EU. So we want to ensure that Northern Ireland is protected.
But at the moment, it's not being protected. No, this is work in progress. Jacob, I've got one last thing to discuss with you before we're out of time. When I said you were coming on earlier, a lot of people said, Jacob Rees-Mogg, where's he gone? We had Mogmentum, we had this There was a movement that suggested that Jacob could quite possibly become the leader of the Conservative Party. And what Jacob thought and what Jacob said on every issue was covered by all the newspapers from left to right. And we got to find out your views and your strong Christian faith and how you won't be bullied on social issues. And we learned all of those things. And this potential leader, and you've disappeared. You're leader of the House. You make some witty remarks in the House, and that's all well and good, and the business of the House of Commons is very important. But Jacob, you've disappeared.
Well, I'm here.
Well, I'm very pleased you are, but we haven't seen you doing interviews. We haven't seen. Have they bought you off with this position, leader of the House?
No, in government, as you know, you're bound by collective responsibility.
Yes.
And you have your area of responsibility, and other ministers have theirs. My area of responsibility is the business of the House of Commons, the government's
but your fans want to see you, Jacob.
I'm delighted to come on your programme, and hope you will invite me back again.
Well, there we are. We've got Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's turned up with his own cider, and I think if he drinks a few more of those, maybe we'll see a lot more of him. I want to thank Jacob Rees-Mogg for coming in for Talking Pints. She's a black US Conservative commentator. She attacks the Democrats vigorously, a passionate supporter and friend of Donald Trump. And in this Talking Pints interview, she talks about the Black Lives Matter movement and how she feels about it, and about something else called Blexit.
There's such a lack of understanding of what's actually going on in America in terms of the race conflict. And it is purely manufactured by the media. And it is encouraged by the Democrat Party, who wants people to vote based on emotionality and on no basis of fact. And in particular, seeing the protests that were going on in the UK about racism and Black Lives Matter, an organization that is not for Black Americans. It's an organization that raised billions and billions of dollars, of which zero...
But it says it is.
Yeah, billions and billions of dollars from white people that feel guilty and believe that there's, racial oppression in America for Black Americans because the media tells them so. And of course, the media never lies. Nigel, as you know, the media never, ever lies. And what it does is it funds white people. The money never goes to Black America. So billions of dollars raised for Black Lives Matter. Not a single Black school built, not a single Black building built up, not a Black neighborhood that was built up. But many more Black people arrested and sent to prison in these riots. More Black people died in these Black Lives Matter riots. But at least the white people felt good when they gave the dollar to Black Lives Matter. So it's a political scam.
But there are a lot of poor black people in America.
There's a lot of poor white people in America. There's a lot of poor people, period. And there's definitely such a thing as economic privilege. There's no white privilege. America is a country that no matter where you come from, you can make something great of yourself if you're willing to work hard and stay out of trouble. And unfortunately, right now, there's this idea that if you are Black, you can't become successful in America. And part of that is a racist idea, by the way.
This is the victim.
This is the victim mentality, and it's cancerous, right? Because if you keep telling somebody that they're a victim and that they are, stuck inside of this idea of being a victim, then they become their own oppressor. When you believe that you are a victim, you become your own oppressor, right? Because you say, why should I try? I'm Black. And my story is very much, I came from nothing. My mother didn't even graduate high school. My family grew up very poor, and I made it in America because I had grandparents who never handed me an excuse. You just got to get up and you have to work.
And now an English husband.
Yes. So,
but he's living in America with you, obviously, and you've got a young child.
We do.
Which is great. So there's a family life, but there's a sort of media life. I mean, that's where you are now, isn't it? A burgeoning media career.
Yeah.
And is that mostly online? Do you appear much on the big TV shows in the States? How does that mix work?
Yeah, so I do, I have my own show with the Daily Wire, and I'm on Fox News once, twice a week. And people, primarily the young people, follow me just on Instagram, on Twitter, because they just like to hear an opinion they haven't heard before. People mean well when they get behind things like Black Lives Matter. They genuinely do mean well.
I think that's right. I think most of the people who turned up on the streets thought, we want to live in a fair society, but I mean, I felt they were being used as pawns. By
facts are there. If people would like to look at the facts, they can look at the facts and actually see that Black Americans know we're not just being gunned down for walking down the street. A police officer doesn't just see us and gun us down. In fact, a police officer is 18.5 times more likely to be shot by a Black man than the other way around. And in America, by rate, if you look at the numbers, white American men and Hispanic men are killed at a higher rate than Black men. People just don't know.
Yeah, no, I know. I've seen those numbers, and And yeah, that narrative just hasn't got through at all.
It hasn't gotten through.
Just hasn't got through in any way. But Brexit inspired you.
It did.
Because it inspired your own political movement.
Brexit.
Blexit. Explain Blexit, please.
So I saw you at CPAC, and I was actually depressed before I saw you because the doors had closed. Nobody knew who I was, and I was going to miss Trump's speech, and so I had to go backstage, and I had a pass that put me backstage, and I was like, I'm going to miss Trump's speech, the first time I'm going to see him speak, and I walk into the room, and I see you, and I'm like, oh, it's Nigel Farage, he's Mr. Brexit, and then I went, oh, that's exactly it. There needs to be a Blexit. There needs to be a black exit from the ideals of progressivism. There needs to be a black exit from this victim narrative that has become so poisonous, and that it is based on a fundamental lie. And so I created the movement to bring conservative principles to the black community, to be a spokesperson for them, because in America and beyond, if you are a black person, you are not allowed to be conservative. You know, you are caricatured, you are lied on by the media, you are attacked.
And yet, a larger number of black people voted Republican, I think in the last 2 elections, than had for a long, long time. So this Donald Trump figure, who I've got to know pretty well over the years, and I like him. You know, I mean, I've made no bones about that, and I've perhaps been his most consistent supporter on this side of the pond, you know, against the media who paint him out to be a monster. But you're personal friends with Donald Trump, and tell me why.
You know, because when he was running, I didn't want him to win, and then I watched the speech that he gave while he was running. Didn't want him. No, I was that same sleepy, oh, Republicans are racist, and then I heard a speech he gave in Dimondale, Michigan in 2015, and the scales fell from my eyes. He sat up there and he listed every statistic. Black community, you've been voting for Democrats for 60 years. Why not take a chance on me? He said specifically, Black America, what do you have to lose? Look at all of the ways you've already lost, right? What's it gonna take for you to just give me a chance? And I went, wow, that's about as good an argument as any. We're not winning, so why not take a chance on something different, you know? And I watched the way the media, who I had trusted at that time, spun what he said and lied and said that he was saying all black people were poor, that all black people were criminals, and it's not what he said at all.
We store, pick, pack and post on behalf of e-commerce sellers. So the guys that you buy from online, particularly in the last couple of years, you know, people have been stuck at home buying from people online. We actually ship that stuff out.
So if you make stuff in your garden shed and sell it online, Hubu can take care of all the logistics, all the packaging, all the difficult stuff that really stops businesses from growing.
We can, we're unique in doing it for a much broader range of clients. They've always been fulfillment companies, which is what a company like ours is called. But they've tended to work with big clients, clients that have relatively few items and that ship them in huge volumes. We work with clients of all sizes, complex clients, you know, clients that sell secondhand or vintage, small clients, people that do sell from their bedroom, so a really broad range.
Tell us about the physical side of the business.
It looks unlike a traditional warehouse, so we really revolutionized the way the warehouse floor works. There are some fundamental problems with warehousing, the biggest one being that it makes people miserable. It has them walking miles and miles every day. The micro warehouse collapses the business into a smaller warehouse that is run by a single individual. So that might be a picker or a packer. For us, they manage the whole thing, more like a retail unit, all of the inbound, all of the outbound, the picking, the packing, the posting. And crucially, they engage with the client as well. So they get that feedback loop that lets them know they're doing a wonderful job or helps them if they're not.
How about your East End background? Does that help?
It's made me tenacious and hardworking, but it's also made me very concerned that the people that work for us should be treated properly and paid properly. We work really hard.
Because you know what it's like at the sharp end.
Yeah, exactly. It's just got sharper and sharper over the last 10 or 15 years. Those kinds of jobs, the wages haven't increased. Meanwhile, the cost of rent these days is ridiculous. It's really difficult for people to make ends meet that are doing those kinds of jobs.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
He's a veteran, well-known commentator and journalist. He's not exactly always a ray of sunshine. And I didn't agree with many of the things that he said, but that's not the point. Peter Hitchens is a guy with a following, an interesting man. And I began this interview by asking him, why did he boycott the Brexit referendum? Peter Hitchens, you've had an interesting journey. You were a socialist as a young man.
I was a Trotskyist.
A Trotskyist.
That's straight choice.
So you were the full 9 yards on the left.
Completely, yes, the whole way.
And so how does that...
Homicidal Bolshevik.
How does that journey go from where you were?
Well, it's enormous fun. It's tremendously educational. You know what you used to think. You can't pretend that you didn't think it, and in my case, I don't. There are many other people who were in the same political movements when I was there back in the late 60s and early 70s. Keep very quiet about it indeed. I don't, because I think it's essential people know. It's probably one of the best political educations you can get, particularly in realism and in how people actually operate.
And was it a rapid?
I'm sorry for some of the things that I said and did, and always will be, but I'm not sorry for the education I got out of it at all.
And was it a rapid, overnight sort of change of position on issues, or was it a gradual?
No, this is never overnight. What everybody does when they change their mind is they feel a strong pressure to change their mind. You know there's a door over there. You open it, there's something beyond it which you're going to have to face, but you hesitate because you know that, in fact, it will change your life. You'll lose, for a start, almost all your friends. And that puts people off changing their minds.
Yeah. And so you made that move. You finished up actually joining the Conservative Party for
yes, I did.
For a period of time. Now, I mean, I'm an ex-Tory.
Terrible mistake.
I'm an ex-Tory as well, although I was in it for a bit. But so where would you place yourself? I mean, you know, I read your stuff in the Mail on Sunday every week and other things that you do, and a lot of people do. Where would you place yourself on the political spectrum today, or isn't that even relevant?
No, it is relevant. I think I would call myself a British Gaullist. It's extraordinary that this combination of strong defence, patriotism, strong welfare state, and national independence isn't more common in politics, because I think it appeals to so many people and suits so many people. But for some reason, this country has not had it and doesn't show any signs of particularly wanting it. But that would be the simplest way of describing it. For those who can remember General de Gaulle.
And what he represented.
You can. But even those who can't, there's a fantastic biography of him by Julian Jackson, which describes this extraordinary life. But it's a very sound position. Something like it exists in the PIS party in Poland. But the problem with them is that they seem to me not to have a particularly strong concern for the rule of law or human liberty. And that has, to me, to be on top of absolutely everything. Liberty under the law, any British politics has to be based upon that, because that's what keeps us what we are.
He's an ex-SAS soldier, a larger-than-life personality. He's worked in private security in some of the most dangerous places in the world. He really is quite a character. And I asked Big Phil Campion, how did it all start?
I was adopted as a kid into an abusive relationship whereby I suffered at the hands of a very violent father, adopted father.
Yeah.
That subsequently broke down. My mother turned violent, so she went noisy. I then ended up in a series of situations where my behaviour plummeted. And I was a handful as a kid. I was an absolute, as they call them, do you know what I mean? But
well, I'm sure you're pretty difficult to handle now.
I've had my moments, Nigel. I've had my moments, you know that. But you know. Anyway, so I ended up in the care system for a series of mismatches of where I went, and you know, I was exposed to sexual abuse, which was used against me as sort of like a lever, a tool. I was told I was nothing. I was told this. I was told that. I was told the other. So I didn't have the greatest childhood, but I did learn a lot from my childhood, and that's very important, do you know what I mean? So you might be having a rough time, but you can learn a lot when you have a rough time. So, yeah, I took from it what I took from it and moved forward with it.
And school?
School, non-existent, left with a cycle proficiency, took that twice, got someone else to help me.
Well, that's something, I mean.
Yeah, so no, I didn't do very well at school at all. I did, however, I went to a public school for a while. They identified that I did have quite a high IQ, did one of those little bubble tests, got sent, state paid for to a public school, but it was state paid for. The other kids knew that, they're like that, oh, look at the old poor kid, they nicknamed me Kevin, took the mickey out of me and all that sort of stuff, do you know what I mean? Yeah, torrid year I had there. But, I've been invited back there since, and I will go up there hopefully this year and see them, and I don't hold grudges like that.
And the army? So the army
was to make it to me.
Was that what you always wanted to do?
No, not really. I wanted to play football for England, but I was rubbish.
There's a lot of kids out there now want to play football for England.
I bet there is,
The last few
there is a substitute for England, I'm telling you. It wins things as well.
Would you fancy taking one of those penalties at Wembley the other night?
I'll take one, yeah, absolutely. I'd be queued up for one. I'd have that. Yeah, all day, yeah.
So the Royal Hampshire Regiment it was?
The Royal Hampshire Regiment I went, yeah, passed me training, best improved recruit. I found out later that means he was an idiot, but we got him over the line.
Yeah.
Had a great time there.
And a wonderful regiment.
Wonderful regiment, great history.
Abolished by John Major.
Abolished by John Major, yeah. At the time, I'd have liked to have got hold of the fleshy part of his neck and give him a talking to, like, do you know what I mean? But it never happened. And, this is one of the things that advocates me to talk about the British Army, because we dealt with that. Yeah. It was a tough time, we dealt with it. And I think that's one of the key things that the British Army does. You can throw at them whatever you like, but they'll deal with it.
Yeah.
They might go slightly round the sun to get the moon sometimes, but they will deal with it, and they will do the best they can.
I mean, then you did some amazing things, because you did the Royal Marine.
I did All Arms Commander course, I did P Company, and then ultimately I did selection for Special Forces.
In the Parachute Regiment.
Yeah, that's right. So P Company for the Parachute Regiment. So I'd be red lid, I'd be green lid.
Yeah.
And then I went away and did my Special Forces stuff. Passed first time, wasn't a retread. And, did a bit of time there. I won't lie to you, got out under a bit of a cloud, but, there you go.
But the SAS, I mean, it's still got this extraordinary mythology that kind of surrounds it. What sort of men succeed in the SAS?
It's a mishmash of all types of blokes, but good blokes ultimately. Good blokes. You don't have to be the fastest in the pack. You don't have to be the racing snake. You don't have to be the strongest, the biggest, the hardest. But it's full of decent blokes. It really is.
But you've got to be fit.
You've got to be fit, yeah, but you don't have to. This is a mistake a lot of young lads make who are going for it. They overtrain, they go nuts, they go mad, they're like, no, calm down a bit, and they'll thrash you, believe me, do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
But it isn't just physical fitness.
It's not just physical fitness, there's a lot of mental fitness.
Yeah.
And, mental resilience as well, actually wanting to be there. That's a very important thing that people miss about the regiment. It's a volunteer organisation. Nobody tells me, if you hear it in the pub sometimes, yeah, so-and-so was told he's going to go to the SAS because he's that good. No, that don't happen. That's a myth. So we'll bust that on your show first here, all right? Okay, that never happens. You volunteer. You're a volunteer to go to the regiment, and that's the way it is. They have a good look at you, and if you pass their selection, you're in. You go on probation for a bit, and then you move on through the ranks and up and do what you got to do.
And do you think the SAS is as good as the reputation that it has?
I think it's better than the reputation it has. I think it's undoubtedly, the best special forces in the world as far as I'm concerned, and you'll never get any other side of the coin off me, I'm telling you. All right?
Well, the Americans might not agree.
No, they can disagree, they can do what they like, but, at the end of the day, their special forces are modelled on ours, not ours on theirs.
Yeah.
OK? We're the world leaders in that sort of thing, and we have been for a very long time.
So, in a sense, joining the army clearly changed your life.
Absolutely, yeah.
Led you on to business and Somali pirates.
Yeah, I got out of the regiment. I bought my way out of the regiment. I'd come back from Sierra Leone. We'd done a few bits and pieces. My behaviour dipped. I had a couple of issues. Well, we'll park it there for now, but another day. Yeah. But I got out. I bought my way out, and it was in September of 2000. 2001, and obviously the planes went cruising in, and I thought, yeah, there's some money to be made here. So I sort of disappeared off to Pakistan, done me bits and pieces, ended up working in Afghanistan. I think I got to the embassy before they did, to be honest. Yeah, it was, and then it just became an absolute mad rush of this private military contracting that you've seen all about Afghanistan, Iraq.
And it's big money.
In the day, it was big money. The lads are going out there for peanuts now, and it really breaks me because they're taking some real risks. They're getting out of sturdy careers in the British military, and they're dumping themselves over there. Do you know what I mean? And and you know, when you look at Afghanistan now, and there's this big pull-out, the Taliban are advancing, and there's guys out there still working for £125 a day.
Wow,
that's insane.
Yeah,
I could get that on Brown's nightclub.
So you were making some decent dough.
I've done a little bit of dough. Yeah, we've done all right out of it.
No, it looks like you did. It looks like you did.
Yeah, we done okay. I wasn't sensible with it, Nigel.
No, well, I wouldn't expect you to be. You know. So was that like almost being a mercenary, or how would you describe what
I prefer to call it contracting. A mercenary, you know, takes up arms and actively involves in things like coups and stuff like that. We weren't. We were always working on jobs that were aiding the infrastructure of the place or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I worked for the European Commission for quite a long period of time. I worked for the United Nations.
Gosh, they'd never have employed me, would they? She was 1/3 of the band Atomic Kitten. She then became Queen of the Jungle by winning I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. And the fame led to some very, very tough and very, very down times. But now she's turning her life around in a remarkable way. It's an inspiring story. It's Kerry Katona.
I was in a nightclub and got approached. For me, it was unbelievable. It was everything I ever wanted to become famous. And for me, when I say becoming famous, I wanted to be loved. That's what I wanted more than anything. I think everybody wants to be loved, but I was so desperate to be loved. So when I became a celebrity and I'm on the stage, it was great. I loved it. I still do now. I still love performing in the shower.
So getting into this group, it just happened.
It just happened overnight. Yeah. So I was in a nightclub, right place at right time. This guy said to me, I know this guy called Andy McCluskey. More Casual News in the Dark. I went along, took my page 3 photographs, told a few jokes, sang a few songs, and they based the band around my personality, and I was a founder member.
Now, page 3, you just mentioned it.
Yeah.
Page
was
3.
you a fan, Nigel?
Oh, big time. But we're not supposed to say that anymore.
I don't see why not.
I mean, page 3, it's all stopped. It's all been banned. It's all seemed to be awful. It's all seemed to be demeaning to women. How do you respond to that?
Well, I do OnlyFans, Nigel, which is an over 18 site as well, and that's how I've become a millionaire again. For me, at school, I'm not going to lie, I had a great chest on me. I wasn't going to be a rocket scientist. Can't believe I'm having this conversation with Nigel Farage on national television. But I had a great rack on me, and I wasn't going to become a rocket scientist. But I knew in my head to get out of this council estate and become what I wanted to. That was my get out. I was a pretty girl.
Was doing page 3, was it demeaning?
No, not at all.
Was it exploitative?
No, I loved it. I enjoyed it. I felt empowered. This is my body, Nigel. I'll do with it what I want. And for me, I didn't have the brains to be a politician or a doctor, but I had the body and I had the brains to know to use that body to a certain extent to get what I wanted. And that was the money and the success and the foundation for my children have private education. All of my kids have private education. I live in a beautiful £2 million house. I've done that. I've created it. And because I've created this little empire, for me now, I've been able to invest in myself with my dating app and my clothing brand and my fitness brand.
But before you got to where you are now, so you had this amazing app and, Atomic Kitten was a mega success and people love it. You make quite a bit of money out of it. You get married, of course, to another big pop star.
Yeah, Brian McFadden.
So, kind of, you've gone from where you were to just this most incredible.
So I got a blessing from the Pope when I married Brian. Lord of God, that did like. But honest to God, I've gone from this kid in foster home to, inviting Mariah Carey to my wedding, to getting a blessing from John Paul the Pope himself.
That's amazing.
And I think that goes to show you can achieve and do anything that you want to, that you set your mind to.
If you believe in yourself.
100%. I'm a massive believer in law of attraction, manifestation, affirmations, gratitudes. I'm a massive believer in all that. I've been on every side of the coin you can think of. But but I've brought it all back.
Because then you went into the jungle.
I did go in the jungle.
And you became the queen of the jungle.
I did. You know what? That for me was, I think, still today, the highlight of my career.
Was it?
To have that amount of love, I keep going back to love again, and being put on that pedestal, which the press do, Nigel, which you know it
well, they
does.
put you up,
they
but then,
put you
but
up
then
there,
they... We'll come to that in a moment.
Yeah. It was
I mean,
amazing. It was amazing.
So, wasn't it humiliating doing bush trucker trials and all this kind of stuff?
Oh, God, no. It was great. For me, I get offered to do these reality shows, and for me, Nigel, I think, wow, what a great opportunity. I would never normally go and do something like that as a normal person. You wouldn't, unless it's offered to you. I've got amazing memories. I've done great adventures. I've done things that I never thought I'd do in a lifetime, and I'm being paid to do it at the same time.
So it was all going. Kind
Yeah.
of, you know, we get into sort of 2004, 5, 6, and kind of life can't get much better.
Mm-hmm.
But then it all goes wrong, Kerry.
Yeah, it does.
Why
It all went wrong, didn't it?
Was it too much success too quickly?
No, I think when my first husband left me, for me, that was straight back down to earth. So before I met Brian, I was in Atomic Kitten. I lived like in a council estate. I was doing drugs with my mother. And Brian was like this knight in shining armour, took me away, moved me to Ireland, sorted my life out. He left me straight back to where I love my mum to bits, by the way. She's sound now. But straight back to where I started. So rather than grieving my marriage failure, not only did I feel a failure as a wife, I felt a failure as a mother as well. And my go-to was cocaine, unfortunately, and that became my best friend, Nigel.
And then the press who
they had a
lifted you up,
field day.
and you were...
When the News Up World was around, they had a field day with me,
you
they
were
did.
plastered, weren't you? All over the Murdoch
Everywhere,
newspapers.
yeah.
And it was relentless.
Yeah, it made me feel suicidal. It really was.
Did it?
Was, yeah, there was like 40 paps outside my house every single day. I know that Saturday phone call when you got,
I know it. I've been through it, yeah.
And you'd be scared, and my phone even to this day is always on silent. I hate phone calls. I always think it's going to be bad news. You know, if my manager rings, say, oh my God, what is it? I get really scared. It was to a point, it was suicidal. That, you know, I couldn't trust everybody. Everyone was telling stories. And then obviously there was, you know, the hacking thing. And it was like, I didn't know who to trust. And cocaine became my confidant. It gave me confidence when I needed it. It was there when nobody else was. And it just turned out to be a liar, really, like most men, Nigel. I nearly died doing that, but I had to turn it all around.
And what do we do with young people? Is the messaging right in schools or...?
No, it isn't. And another thing that's not even good in schools as well, which really gets to me, like the bankruptcy and the drugs, it's not spoke about. You go to school, Nigel, and you learn about the Battle of Hastings, right? What's that going to do for somebody when they leave school? No one teaches you about a mortgage. I want you to tell me why it's not in the education. No one teaches you about mortgage, don't teach you about bankruptcy unless you do a business course.
Yep.
And not everybody does that. And it's only briefly spoke about then. They don't teach about your VAT or your tax or life insurance or a will or a mortgage.
So you're not being prepared for life.
You're not, and they're the most important things. You have to, you know, the whole dream is, you know, getting married, having kids, getting a mortgage, getting your life. No one teaches you any of that.
I love it. You're right.
Like your credit card, no one teaches you about anything.
Just getting people to pass exams is not education.
Well, I don't think so. It's about life skills.
I'm with you.
No one and even today, like, when my children leave school, they're not going to have a clue how to get a mortgage. No one teaches that kind of stuff. Or about drugs and mental health. It's not taught enough. 1 in 4 people suffer. I've got bipolar. 1 in 4 people suffer with a mental health. No one teaches it in school properly. I think it's wrong. Come on, Nigel, you can sort this out.
You ever thought about politics?
Me for MP.
But you're really passionate there about the way we should be bringing teenagers
100%. I think we go on about life, and the reason why so many people make these mistakes with drugs is due, a lot of it, to mental health, and it's not spoken about enough in the schools at all. Addiction, bipolar, things like domestic abuse. This is real life stuff that you're taught that happens to people when they grow up, you know, and none of that is taught, and I think it's wrong.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Karen Roberts. This is your news at 4 o'clock. The sentences of the stepmother and father who killed Arthur Labinjo Hughes have been referred to the Court of Appeal for being too lenient. Emma Tustin was jailed for life with a minimum 29 years after being convicted of his murder. Thomas Hughes was given 21 years for manslaughter. The 6-year-old died from a brain injury whilst under their care in June last year. A date for the hearing is yet to be set. Murder investigations have launched after 2 boys were stabbed in separate incidents in the capital. The killings bring the number of teenage homicides in London this year to a record number of 30. A 16-year-old boy was fatally wounded in Newsley and a 15-year-old was stabbed in Croydon. London Mayor Sadiq Khan says he's devastated by the double tragedy. New data shows the risk of hospital admission as a result of Omicron is about 1/3 that of Delta. The UK Health Security Agency studied more than 1 million cases of both variants. It found booster jabs are extremely effective against Omicron, with a third dose leading to an 81% reduced risk of hospitalisation. That's compared with unvaccinated patients. Boris Johnson claims government targets to offer booster jabs to all eligible adults have now been met. In his New Year message, the Prime Minister says 7 in 10 people have now had their third vaccine. Health leaders, however, have warned up to 40% of vaccine appointments are no-shows. It comes as the Office for National Statistics estimates a record 2.3 million people in the UK had coronavirus last week. The Prime Minister is urging those celebrating tonight to take a test before going out.
The British people have responded heroically, voluntarily, and in almost incredible numbers to the call to get vaccinated. Though I must, of course, urge everyone to be cautious and to take a test if you're going out, and to remember the importance of ventilation. Follow the rules if you're in Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland.
Well, that's your news update. I'll be back with more at the top of the next hour. Bye for now.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. It will be a very mild start to 2022, but a bright and blustery day for most, and not a lot of rain around either. For many, it's dry through New Year's Eve as well. There are some weather fronts here and there, but the main thing is the winds coming up from the south, bringing the very mild air that's been across us for a number of days now. Temperatures across northern Scotland could drop down to single figures, but a bit of patchy rain working in here as well, and we'll see a few showers maybe for Northern Ireland, western parts of England, Wales and Scotland around midnight. But for the vast majority, it will stay dry, and it will be a very mild night if you're heading out. Temperatures holding up in double figures for the vast majority. As I said, across northern Scotland for a time, we could drop a little lower than that. But even here, temperatures will be rising as we go towards dawn. New Year's Day then, dry for the majority, but there will be this zone of wetter weather crossing Scotland, England and Wales. As it works into the Midlands, it'll tend to fizzle out, so not much rain here. Could you see a bit of rain cropping up across the southeast and East Anglia later on. Showers for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland. Very windy in Western Scotland, and a blustery day wherever you are, but with some sunny spells, temperatures getting into the teens once more. A very mild start. That rain could linger across parts of Kent through the evening, and then we look further west as some bands of heavy showers come swinging in during Saturday night and into Sunday. They'll be around across the east initially on Sunday morning, but then another zone of potentially very wet and windy weather comes swinging into the southwest. This looks pretty nasty. This needs watching. Some very heavy rain mixed in with that, some very gusty winds as well, working across England and Wales on Sunday. Further north, a mixture of sunshine and showers. Low pressure continues to dominate, but we are going to see a change. The south or southwesterly winds of the moment replaced by northerly winds, and that means things will turn colder through the middle of the week.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Welcome to the Farage Trump interview here in West Palm Beach. We went to Mar-a-Lago on Monday afternoon to record the interview. Now, there's no pretending. I've been a friend and a supporter of Donald Trump for the last 6 years. But that did not stop me in this interview asking the important questions that needed to be asked. And I have to say, as ever, Trump's responses were passionate, were strong, and in one or two cases that I think you'll see this evening, actually rather memorable. It is remarkable the extent to which this man dominated the global news agenda ever since the moment in 2015 when he announced he was going to run. But outside of the USA, we just haven't heard of him for a very, very long time. I guess being silenced on Twitter has made a big difference. What we're going to do this evening is play you the world exclusive Donald Trump interview in two parts. And the first part is dealing with the election last year, the aftermath, his attitude towards it, And we'll be joined throughout the programme by some very senior Republicans, Democrats, by people that support him and people that don't support him, hopefully to give you a balanced, fair debate on where we are with Donald Trump, and in particular, whether he's going to run again in 2024. So let's have a look at part one of the Trump interview. From the moment in 2015 when he announced he was going to run to become US president, Donald Trump has been in world news. He's dominated world news. Every day for 5 years, all over the world, it was Donald Trump has said this. Donald Trump is alleged to have said that, and what other people said about him. Yet something very odd has happened. Since the beginning of this year, outside the United States, he's virtually disappeared. Has he been silenced? Is it voluntary? What is going on? Well, today, we're going to find out. We're going to break that. And the first big foreign interview that Donald Trump has done. This is Trump Speaks to the World with me, Nigel Farage, here on GB News. Good to see you.
Well, I didn't know I was so quiet, but if you say so, that's okay with me.
Yeah, and I wonder, is that because of social media to a very, very large extent?
I don't know. I mean, I have not heard that, but it's possibly so. I have a lot of things to say, and sometimes I want to say them, and sometimes I don't feel it's appropriate to say them based on the position. We had a great election. We ended up, it was a rigged election, unfortunately. We got more votes than any sitting president in history by far, 75 million votes, more than 12 million that we had from the previous election, which was about 63 million votes. I think we've said a lot about a lot of things, and certainly there's a lot to talk about. If you look at what's going on in Afghanistan with the withdrawal, which was, I think, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, and you look at our borders, what's happening with our borders, you look at the cost of energy, we were energy independent, and we no longer are. You look at so many different things. You and I could talk all day.
Yeah.
And it's a shame what's happened to the United States.
But we've not heard you through, I guess, through Twitter. It was for you, something that you used to massive effect. Oh, Jack Dorsey is being removed as CEO of Twitter because of shareholder pressure. But whether that means they'll improve as a channel or not. I mean, I was amazed the day that the Taliban, you mentioned Afghanistan a moment ago, the day the Taliban took over Kabul, I did put out a message that said it seemed ridiculous that their leadership was still active on Twitter, and yet you were still banned.
Well, they were wrong in what they did, and we're dealing with the United States president, who's obviously a popular president based on everything that you see, and them and Facebook, and I think they made a big mistake. I think if they had it to do over again, they wouldn't be doing it. We are... we get the voice out. We have to do it. We have an obligation to do that. But he's leaving. I guess it was probably enforced because they're down. And also, there's no excitement on Twitter anymore, as I understand. There used to be a lot of excitement. Not only me, conservative people are leaving and being canceled. So they're canceled, they're leaving. And in my case, we used to get tremendous interaction with liberals and everybody else. And now they just say it's a very boring place to be, Twitter. It's going down. The numbers are going way down.
No, they are. On the election, as you say, you got 11 million votes more than you got in 2016. Because we know what happened. 29th of February last year, I was with you backstage at CPAC, and I thought he's going to win 40 states. I mean, things were looking terrific. The pandemic hit. And then you kind of got criticized from both sides. Biden said you were xenophobic because you closed the borders. You said we don't want foreign air travel. We don't want this virus being brought in. The other side said you didn't lock down hard enough. I mean, difficult in a pandemic to win as a president, as a leader. But the real effect, of course, was, for the first time ever in America, tens of millions of ballots being sent out through the mail system.
Well, they use COVID, or the China virus, as I call it, to rob and rig and steal an election. And they sent out millions and millions of ballots. Nobody knows where they went in so many cases, and it was a disgrace. And everybody knows it. You look at even polls now, a big percentage of our country knows it, and it's very bad for democracy. Very, very bad for
the problem was in so many of these states, because they'd never seen it before, kind of what they did in collecting the votes wasn't against the law, and that was part of the problem.
Well, but they didn't get it approved in many cases by legislatures, and you have to, so therefore it is against the law. It wasn't approved by state legislatures. You know, you can't do it even through a court. You can't do it. It has to go through the legislature, and the legislatures didn't approve this stuff, and the courts didn't have the courage to take it up. And so it's an interesting situation, but we'll see how it all ends out.
I mean, a lot of Americans, as you rightly say, a lot of Americans are genuinely concerned about election integrity. And I have to tell you, from my experience back in the UK, mass postal voting, leads to the wrong results very often.
Absolutely. Automatically, by the way.
It's a bad system.
They cheat.
It's a bad
automatic.
system.
I mean, they put everybody on the millions of people on the honor system. No, there's tremendous cheating with that. And, they've done studies on it. Everybody knows it. Every study comes out, you can't do it through the mail. You can't do it. These mail-in ballots are, whether it's your country, whether it's the USA, it's an open invitation to cheat.
But here's the problem. I've seen some pretty extensive private polling that suggests that up to 20% of your potential voters and supporters feel so demotivated by the message that it's been rigged, that it's not fair, that it's not just, that in Georgia, for example, in that special election, which was the one that tipped the balance in the Senate, there were a number that perhaps didn't go out to vote who would have done because they felt disgusted with the whole system.
Well, they felt the election was rigged, the preceding election, which was the presidential election. And then when they had to vote a couple of months later, they really did lose their enthusiasm. And frankly, rightfully so. They had the governor of Georgia did a terrible job, just terrible, having to do election integrity. And they felt an election was rigged and stolen. And I would say they didn't have the enthusiasm to go out and vote. And I understand that. Now, one other thing, Mitch McConnell did a terrible job, because this guy's talking about $600 giving during this troubled time, and they're talking about $2,000. You don't win elections that way. Now, right or wrong, you just don't win elections that way. So Mitch McConnell was a disaster, and I think that really they did get a lot of votes, but a lot of people were discouraged. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I'm sure of that. So looking ahead, from here, is the message to look back at November 2020 and to condemn and criticize much of what happened? Or is the message to look forward and try and make sure that weakness in the system can't exist again?
I think it's both. I think it has to be both. We have a base in Alabama, as an example. I had 69,000 people recently show up. Wherever I go, I think I'm getting bigger crowds now at the rallies, and the rallies because you've been to plenty of them. I have the biggest crowds I've ever had. And I think it has to be both, because if you don't study what took place and do something about it, if possible, I think they're going to do something about it. I don't view that as a foregone conclusion. If you don't look back, you really can't look to the future. But I think it's really a combination of both, and very strong to the future, but also it's very strong looking back. People don't want that to happen again.
No, and voter ID. I mean, for example,
voter ID is very
there's an overwhelming majority, and it's not just Republican voters, of Democrat voters who think voter ID makes sense and we've got to have free and fair.
Right. If we didn't have as an example, if we didn't have what happened in 2020, all of these legislatures and all of these people that are meeting and passing voter ID now would have never happened. So, looking back is okay. You have to look both ways, but you can't forget about what happened. And if you did, you wouldn't have all of the things that are happening now happen. And there's some very exciting things. But one of the big things is voter ID. And you have to stop the mail-in voting. The mail-in voting is just ripe for fraud. And that's what it was.
Well, I'm keen to look ahead with this conversation. One last point about the past. 6th of January, which is something that your opponents gleefully seized upon, particularly, the social media giants on the West Coast and everybody else. And I know that you were willfully misquoted in terms of what you'd said that day. Because
in many different ways.
No, you were saying go in peace, and I understand that, and I get that. Looking back on the 6th of January, was it a mistake to have had that rally on that day? Or?
Well, I didn't have, that was a rally that was there, and if you look, it was a massive rally with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. I think it was the largest crowd I've ever spoken before. And I reverse it. The insurrection took place on November 3rd. That was Election Day. And before and after. That was, to me, the insurrection. And the January 6th was a protest. But if you would have looked at the crowds, the size, nobody wants to talk about that. I believe it was the biggest, and most people, and I've spoken to very big crowds. I have never spoken in front of a crowd that size. Nobody ever talks about that. And then, unfortunately, some bad things happened, but also the other side had some very bad things happen. And add this, I offered 10,000 and suggested 10,000 National Guardsmen. We want the National Guard to be there, 10,000, or even the military, because I knew the crowd was going to be massive, because I knew the anger that took place over the election being rigged. And I understood that. I understood it better than anybody. And Pelosi and these people turned it down. We would have had tremendous security, but they turned it down.
And that would have stopped people going in.
Oh, that would have stopped any problem. Absolutely. They turned it down. Also, as you know, the police, I guess they say, were not given proper instructions by Capitol Hill, which is Pelosi. They were given some very bad instructions. So if you look at what happened and go back and really study it, they were so angered and so upset. And so, people crying. They were so angered by it. Now, if you lost the election, people don't act that way. But they knew that we won the election, and they went there. But to me, the real insurrection, if you look at it, took place on Election Day.
Now, either way, we've got Biden and Harris in office, and they've got plummeting poll ratings, and we've got a border crisis, as you quite rightly said, law and order, the Black Lives Matter movement, which is now becoming increasingly, I think, political, don't you?
It's shocking that it started off, with pigs in a blanket, right? You know that, right?
Yeah.
You know the expression, fry them like bacon. And that was about our police, our great police. And all of a sudden this becomes mainstream? I don't really think so. And Antifa, bad, very bad. And they had Antifa in that rally. They had Antifa leading a lot of people on that day on January. And I will say that it's pretty incredible that nothing happens to them. But the other side, this has been going on for many years.
So they're not just about racial equality then?
Well, I think they're about politics, but I think they're about a lot of other things. If you go back to their original founding and what they were saying, kill the police. What they're saying is kill the police.
I know.
And that becomes mainstream. Not good.
No, not good. We've seen specimens of it, of course, over in the UK, and we've seen Churchill's statue defaced and all of these things.
Well, you saw Churchill's beautiful bust being removed from the White House. When I got there, I said, send it back. They called, would you like to have the bust of Winston Churchill, a great one, right?
Yep.
Even you would say that,
Nigel. Absolutely.
And I said, I absolutely want it. Explain. And as you know, President Obama, I believe, sent it back. He didn't want it. And I said, let's bring it back.
No, well, Joe Biden got rid of it on the first day. Which
did he? Oh,
yeah. Which is why, of course,
surprised.
there's been no advancement with trade deals and all the rest of it.
Why would you do that with Winston Churchill and you're trying to get along with your country? And you send, it's such a token, but such an important token. No, I had it back for my entire time. It was there. I looked. He was a very handsome man.
He's a very brave man, too. But Biden, G7. Biden turns up at the G7, and this was before he let everybody down in Afghanistan, and which leaves us wondering, where is America in the world now? We've got big threats, haven't we? We've got a lot of Russian troops on the Ukrainian border. We've got China, ever more bellicose in their statements about Taiwan. We've got Iran. Can you believe it? Negotiations are going on this week with Iran, and the Israelis are very, very scared. Where is America in the world right now?
I think it's at the lowest point it's ever been at. I don't think it's ever been in a position like this. We're not respected anymore. I will tell you, there were no planes flying over Taiwan. And the name wasn't even mentioned. You didn't talk about Taiwan when I was president. It wasn't going to happen, what they're doing now. And they'll wait till after the Olympics, I assume, and perhaps something will happen. But it's not good if you're there and you have bombers flying over your country constantly, which is constant. With Russia, we had no problem. I had no problem. You didn't mention North Korea, Kim Jong-un.
No, when you crossed the line and
I got along with him great. I got along with him almost as well as I
Little
can.
Rocket Man, you called him.
I did. And we became very friendly, like you. Sort of like you.
He forgave you.
But you know, the truth, we didn't have a problem, and now you've got a problem with them too. You didn't mention that one, and honestly, that's a big problem because he does have serious nuclear power, and many other things. If you take a look at energy independence, we were energy independent, first time ever, and now we are going and begging for oil. We're going back begging for oil. We go to Saudi Arabia, we go to Russia, OPEC. We go and say, please give us oil. We had so much oil, we didn't know what to do with it. A gallon of gasoline was $1.87 when I left. Now it's going to be $7.50 in California.
Yeah.
And the big thing is going to be inflation, because the inflation, and it's hitting you too. It hits everybody now. Yeah. But the inflation is at a level maybe that we haven't seen for, I guess, 40, 50 years.
40 years.
It's a big problem.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Welcome back. Here we are in West Palm Beach. We've just showed you part one of the Donald Trump interview, and he does make some very strong claims about the conduct of the election here in America on November the 3rd. Well, to discuss that, and perhaps to get a slightly different opinion, I don't know, I'm very pleased to be joined by Susan Platt. She is a Democrat and former Chief of Staff to Joe Biden when he was a senator. Susan, we're delighted to welcome you to the programme. To begin, just a general question, if I can. Up until the election of November 2020, whilst there was the availability of absentee voting in America, it was actually only ever a tiny percentage of the population. And for the first time, America went in for, we call it postal voting, you call it mass mail-out voting, and just leaving Donald Trump out of it for the moment, would it not be fair to say that any election that involves mass postal voting has two problems? One, the integrity of that vote, and secondly, that here in America, tens of millions of people had voted weeks before polling day itself and therefore hadn't heard all of the debate.
Well, Nigel, thank you very much for having me, and good evening to all your guests. I did listen to your interview with the former president. And since we're entering the holiday season, I'm going to try to be a little bit kinder than maybe I normally would. What came out of his mouth was so much misinformation, reckless language, and frankly, what came out today was reckless behavior, where it just was a bulletin that he had been tested positive for COVID 3 days prior to his debate with Joe Biden, and where his family and no one wore masks. So let me just begin by saying the blatant disregard for people is just continues as it concerns him. In terms of voting, Oregon, I believe, for many, many years has had mail-in voting all the time, and many weeks up to and including. The purpose behind our election is to try to be as inclusive of everyone, allowing everyone to have their voice, to make their point, to make their vote, because it is a democracy. So anything that we can do to increase voter participation is a good thing. And when we talk about, well, people, it's rife for fraud or abuse, let's remember that many states did audits 2 and 3 times with very little, such a small percentage of any mischief going on. I think we have to continue to be an open, honest democracy where everyone can participate. And as easy as we can make that happen, the better off we're going to be.
Well, we've had mass mail-out voting in the United Kingdom. It was introduced 20 years ago. We have seen repeated court cases. We have seen people going to prison. And I would like to see, rather like France, where they just don't allow this to happen. Only 2 or 3% of the vote in France is done by people, who are being represented by a proxy or whatever. But here's the point I'm trying to make. You talk about it being a democracy and about wanting to engage people in it. But by the time that first debate had happened between Trump and Biden, 100 million people had already voted. So the point I'm making is, even without discussing the potential for intimidation or fraud, the point I'm trying to make is how on earth can people make an informed judgment on the election if they haven't even heard the debates? Doesn't it make more sense to try and get as many people as possible to actually vote on polling day itself?
Well, I think if it was a national holiday, maybe it'd make it easier. But unfortunately, there are people who work different hours. They work different shifts. They can't always get off on that day. There's lots of reasons why we need to have and make voting easier for everybody. And I will say, if we did that, I would support that. I think a lot of people would support a national holiday. But still, you're going to have people working who cannot get off. Voting in Virginia, it's voting from 6 to 7 p.m. Not everybody can do that. So let's make it open as we can. People can make a determination how they feel about the candidates. A lot of folks do make a determination who vote earlier, and those who are undecided, they wait till later. And that's just the way the system works. And I think it's a good system. Like, again, unless you have a national holiday where everybody can go vote, it's the best system we got.
Well, I'll tell you what 75% of Americans do think. They do think that when you turn up at the polling station, having voter ID, having a clear photograph, official document of some kind with you makes sense, that it supports the idea that you have elections that have genuine integrity. So big majority of Americans, and that includes just over half of Democrat voters, think voter ID makes sense. And yet, when down in Georgia, it is suggested by some in the Republican Party that this should be the case for all future elections. We see very senior Democrat voices arguing against it, and even, to me, making the ludicrous argument that it's racist to expect people to produce voter ID. Do you see why, given the stance of some very prominent Democrats, it leads the Republicans to believe that the system is being rigged against them?
No, because not everybody owns a car, so not everybody has a driver's license. Not everybody has the ability to travel overseas or has a passport. So how are you going to do that? I think you have to decide, how are you going to give somebody an ID? Right now, you can go to some polling locations and bring your gas bill or bring your tax bill and say to verify who you are. It's not one size fits all for everybody. We're a big country with all different views and different locations and how we get and how we vote and different voting times and places. I think it's important to remember we have to make it as inclusive and available to as many people as possible, not exclusive. Now, I will say in Virginia, Democrats lost the election this year, the governor's election, where we all hoped we would, because more and more people came out to vote. So you could argue that those rules helped the Republicans in Virginia this year.
Yeah, the argument I'm making is that I would have thought voter ID, in the modern world, people do have ID. I would have thought that it makes sense. Susan, finally, let me ask you, two-part question. Number one, do you, in your heart,